Simple Explanation of Work Ideas by Maurice Nicoll. Chapter 4. Help exists, but can only reach the third level of consciousness, called the state of self-consciousness, or self-awareness, or self-remembering. This is the first truly waking state. To become conscious, we have to begin to observe ourselves. We have to observe what we are saying, what we are thinking, what we are feeling, what sensations we are having, what our movements are. We have to observe ourselves aright from a definite starting point in a definite direction. First, that we are not one but many. We are a thinking man, an emotional man, a moving man, an instinctive man who feels hungry, thirsty, hot or cold, well or ill. All these are separately controlled by what the work calls centers. Intellectual center controls our thinking, and emotional center controls what emotions we feel. Moving center controls all the movements of the body, and instinctive center looks after all the inner workings of the body, such as the digestion of food, the circulation of the blood, breathing, and sensation. We often think one thing and feel another because the different centers do not work in harmony. If a man observes himself only in relation to intellectual center and emotional center, he will see that he is two people and not one. The mind of moving center works differently from the mind of intellectual center. For instance, the moving activity of the hands when playing the piano in contrast to the intellectual activity of the mind when thinking and conversing. The working of the body is controlled by instinctive center. It looks after all the inner work of the organization of the body, of which intellectual center knows nothing. If we wish to know ourselves in the right way to be more conscious of ourselves, we must first observe these four men in ourselves. Take, for instance, getting up early and the difficulties involved, showing we are not a unity. This shows how intellectual center cannot by itself control other centers. Two centers must be in agreement to control a third. The first stage in self-change, then, is to realize that one is not one person. We must realize we are four different people, four people with different minds. Each center has a certain amount of force available to it at a particular time to work it. If this force is used up, it cannot do its work properly. We cannot go on using one center for as long as we fancy. The force is exhausted. But we can then use another center. Everything we do takes force. Thinking, feeling, moving about, eating, drinking. Mechanically, we act from the center which is stored with force and is attracted by something. We must understand that if we are exhausted in one center, it is possible to use the force in another. Our lives are distributed over the centers. Each has its different interests which are not antagonistic but complementary to each other. And each is necessary for human life. Balanced man means a man in whom all centers work normally and have their right periods of activity. Now the intellectual and moving centers can be made to act by direct effort. We can work out a problem, concentrate on something, or do some muscular task, but we cannot make ourselves have a particular emotion, or make ourselves hungry, cold, hot, etc. To a certain extent, we can resist an emotion or sensation, but we cannot direct what kind of emotion or sensation we have. Chapter 5. All men have intellectual center, emotional center, and the instinctive and moving centers, but in different men these centers are very differently developed. Example. Take a man who likes activity and a man who likes to think, a number 1 man and a number 3 man. If they try to meet, they each wish to talk of things which arise from their predominating centers. They are alike in that they both have the same centers, but they are unlike in that one has developed in moving center and the other in intellectual center. Humanity is divided into 3 types of man: number 1 man, number 2 man, and number 3 man. Number 1 man has to be further classified according to whether he is number 1 moving, whose primary concern is with action and muscular work, and number 1 instinctive, whose primary concern is for physical comfort, and who will be lazy and inactive. The majority of mankind is either number 1 instinctive or number 1 moving man. Number 2 is emotional man who feels everything. At one moment he is enthusiastic and exalted, the next he is depressed and moody. He is concerned with his likes and dislikes. His life swings between hope and despair, enthusiasm and dejection, love and hate, like and dislike. Number 3 is intellectual man. His center of gravity lies in intellectual center. He is a theorist with a theory about everything. His own thoughts and other people's recorded thoughts interest him more than anything else. Each of these 3 men is characterized by having one center mainly at work. An educated man, however, is not merely 1, 2, or 3. The other centers to a certain extent work in him. First example, take a number 1 moving, 2, 3 man, a soldier. His emotions make him moody or sensitive or jealous. He is preoccupied with himself and not good at exams. Second example, take a number 1 instinctive, 3, 2 man. He is also a soldier, fond of sport, but he studies the history of wars and strategy and perhaps non-military subjects. He gets through exams quite easily, but he feels little, is not upset or moody, but a harsh disciplinarian. So 6 formulations of man can be made: 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. A 1, 2, 3 instinctive man is concerned chiefly with eating, will be lazy and disinclined to make effort. Governed by his body, he will be easily depressed, become sulky and moody. Such a man hardly thinks at all. Which of these men we are can only be found out by self-observation. But proper approach to life necessitates the proper working of all centers, and to approach situations with the wrong center is useless. Each center requires its own development. Mechanical humanity is lopsided because life is viewed through one center only, and consequently the people belonging to the mechanical circle of humanity do not understand one another. The aim and object of this work is to reach balanced man, number 4 man. Number 4 man has all the centers more or less equally developed, so that one center does not usurp the function of another, and each center does its own work as may be appropriate to the situation. To reach number 4 man, it is necessary to work on oneself consciously. Number 4 man is not mechanical. People who have begun to reach the level of number 4 man begin at the same time to understand one another. To begin to approach number 4 man, a person must be willing to develop those sides of himself which are lacking in development. Therefore, no new experience is useless once one understands the direction in which evolution lies. In life, people do not understand one another because they have no common language. The first step to understanding one another is to learn a common language. Chapter 6. We have seen that man is not 1 but 4, each center in him being a different mind. He is in fact multiple. Over a long period, self-observation will show us this multitude, to each of which we say I. At every moment these I's change. Now one, now another speaks, and one may contradict another, or at least know nothing of what the first I said. We ascribe to ourselves many things which we do not possess, such as full consciousness, will, and a real permanent I that never changes. This is illusion. Man has not one will, but many contradictory wills. Man is not conscious, but lives almost all his life asleep. He has not a permanent I, but a multitude of I's. Man is compared in a work allegory to a house in disorder. The master is away, and the servants are doing what they like. When the telephone rings, they speak and pretend that they are the master, and make all sorts of promises and orders under this pretense. Some of these servants feel that there is a better state possible. They see clearly what is going on, and band together with the intention of putting order in the house, in the hopes that this will attract the return of the master. Each I in a man has been acquired from some experience in life, from imitation, from environment, from something real, from fantasy, from profession, etc. Man is not born with personality, but with essence. Personality begins to form itself very early in life, as soon as the child begins to imitate. At this point, it acquires affectations, mannerisms, etc. Eventually, the child takes as himself all that has been acquired. Observing oneself from the standpoint of many I's, we begin to realize it is not the same person always speaking, though we call it I. We notice that different I's speak at different times of the day, taking charge of us. We are changing all the time. Some I's are waking up, some I's are going to sleep. One I makes a promise that the other I's know nothing about. Some I's are very dangerous, and if we want to develop, we have to prevent them from taking charge. These are especially the I's that twist things, that lie about everything, that are revengeful or bitter, that are full of self-pity or malice. A baby is born as essence, and is awake insofar as it really is essence. It is of course small, but quite real. But being born amongst sleeping people, it soon falls asleep. It begins to imitate, and that is one reason why personality is formed. Try to observe yourself from the standpoint of different I's existing in you, and notice how they often contradict one another. Notice the I's you are in when you are alone. Notice how they change when anyone comes into the room. Try to notice the intonation with which different I's speak.